and welcome to our last book club of Sex Begins in the Kitchen by Dr. Kevin Lehman. I've had so much fun doing this book, and marriage is definitely one of my passions that I just am so excited about, and it's such a huge part of my life, and I pour into a lot of effort into it and thinking into it. So I just really, really enjoyed this book. Not that I won't enjoy other books that are coming up the rest of the year, which I'll go over here in just a second. But this one has just been super special because marriage is just near and dear to my heart. So I want to go over, and I'll turn the camera around so that you can see. But I just pinned the rest of our schedule for the 2026 book club schedule on the top of my Facebook page. So if you want to know what's coming up, what we'll be doing, dates and everything for each study, it is pinned to the top of my Facebook page. But I wanted to show you it here too because I put it right inside my thing there. And I can't tell if it's blurry or not. But anyway, so we just finished Sex Begins in the Kitchen, and our next one is Be Fruitful and Multiply. That starts next week. Then we will do Mama Bear Apologetics. What are the stakes? I'm that girl and raising financially confident kids. So I'm so sorry. So unprofessional, but okay. So that's what's going to be coming up for the rest of 2026 as we finish out this marriage book. Then we'll go on to Be Fruitful and Multiply. Let me grab my book so that I can show you what we'll be doing. That book, let me grab it. Okay. And I am getting out of breath super easily because baby is coming in a couple weeks. So my lungs are smashed. Anyway, Be Fruitful and Multiply. My next Monday motivation video, I talk about this upcoming book and kind of my testimony of where God brought my husband and I to the thought of children are a blessing and God controlling the womb and all of that. So this will be a 9-week study. I will also pin, from here on out, I think I made graphics for all of them already. But whatever book we're on, I'll also pin that schedule to the top of my Facebook page as well, so that you know what to read from week to week, so that you know what we're going to be covering, that upcoming week and what we're going to be going over. So it is a 9-week study. And next week, I believe I started reading in here this morning. I believe it is the foreword, the introduction, and chapter 1, I'm pretty sure. So right after this, I'll make sure I pin that to my page so that you know what chapters we'll be going over in Be Fruitful and Multiply next week. So that's the logistic housekeeping things for the book club. So now that that's done, let's jump right into this. And you know what? I need to pray too. God kind of convicted me of that last week. So before we get started and jump into the book, let's go ahead and pray. Dear God, thank you so much for setting aside this time. God, I know how big of a commitment it is for me to be here each week, and it's always a rush to get here. And I know other ladies are in the same exact boat as I am in motherhood. But God, we just are so grateful that you are with us in every season, that you're with us in the car, if we're listening to this sound, that you are allowing me to film these things, and hopefully you're speaking through me to encourage other women that may be struggling in their marriage or have questions about, what you say about children and the womb and all of those things. So God, I just pray that you would ultimately speak to me, through me, to the women that are listening to this, and that you would just use me as a vessel for your words. God, I pray that each woman that needs to hear these things would hear them. And God, we just thank you for allowing us to set aside time to come to you and learn about the things that you are passionate about, God. And we're just so thankful that you love us. And we pray again, thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. So the last two chapters He's so funny. Are 11 and 12. And chapter 11 is titled Yings, Weenies, Tallyrockers, and the Thing. So he basically starts out this chapter with a funny story about when he was at a conference and asked what the audience called our genitalia, male and female, and to say the least, he got some pretty funny answers. So basically, he's saying that the point that he's making is that those cute names just demonstrate our discomfort in talking about sex, teaching our children about it. And he said, as funny as those names are, and they can be sure to cock up an audience, he said, when you're teaching your children, you need to use the right words. And he said that there is a lack of proper sex education with our children. Basically, when we can't say penis and vagina, it teaches our children that it's like a dirty word. It's something that we don't say, right? Because we don't say bad words, right? We just don't say that. They don't come out. So when we can't say those words of what the genitalia actually are, then it inadvertently teaches our children that they're dirty and just not words that we talk about. So Trust Biology obviously recommends that you use those words, that you say them, and teach them to your children. And I think I talked about this last time too, but I did a YouTube video on Monday Motivation about teaching your children in an age-appropriate way sex and how you talk about that. So definitely go check that out, because we always tell our children that the most important decision that they will make in their entire life is if they follow Christ. But then the second most important is if they choose to marry and who they choose to marry. So obviously sex is a huge, huge part of that. So we always tell them that is the second biggest decision. And it doesn't start when they become of dating age. It starts when they're little, and we're talking about penises and vaginas. So don't be afraid to talk about that, get resources, that you know that you're doing it properly, because the fact of the matter is if you don't educate your children on sex, they're going to hear it from somebody else, and you want them to know the proper things. Okay, I'm going to read this little section here because I thought it was really good. He said, basically, not only do we need to think proper names for the private parts, but we also want to talk about the attitude in which we have regarding sex and our thoughts towards that. So in this little section, he says, basically, we have this superior inferior attitude towards sex itself. Okay, and I'll let him do the talking of what he means by that. Okay, so he says, imagine we're in our locker room at high school listening to the guys come from their practice. One guy yells across the locker room, "Hey, Charlie, what did you get last night?" Charlie will respond with, "Oh, he got this, or a little bit of that, or he almost scored." Just think for a moment about the words that these guys are using for sex. They're not saying sex. They're saying score, get, conquest, right? Do these sound like loving, caring terms, or do they seem far removed from the special feelings that we should have towards someone with whom we are involved in a loving relationship? That's it. I don't even have to answer that. These young people are learning that sexual relationships are competitive. Remember, I said that this section was superior, inferior attitude. Their idea about sex is that it's a taking from rather than a giving to experience. This question seems to be, how can I get for myself? And not how much of how can I give to the other person. This is one of the results of early teaching that sex is bad, dirty, and it's an undiscussable subject, okay? Naturally, forbidden fruit is all the more desired, right? From the Garden of Eden, we know this. Hence the competitive attitude. These young people are approaching sex as if it's a competition, a place where someone has to win and get somebody, and then somebody has to lose, right? Or I've heard the term, did you get lucky last night? What? Okay, so these aren't secrets. I know that all of you have experienced this in some way, shape, or form. Maybe you have fallen prey to speaking like that. Usually it's not women, usually it's the guys that talk like that, but many of the women do. I watched an interview from Charlie Kirk, Lord bless his heart. He went on a podcast of all porn stars. And the way that the girls were talking about sex was how I have always heard guys talk about it. So there's definitely this like feministic dynamic that has changed over the last decade or so. And we're viewing either one, whichever way it's coming from, we're viewing the other thing as an object, as things to be used, rather than looking at sex as something that you enter into selflessly, wanting to please your spouse. And obviously the safety and commitment of a marriage is where that can happen. I think that in the best sexual relationship, there are no superior or inferior roles, but mutual love and respect. She said that some people may sound old-fashioned and insist that fulfilling sex can stem, when he insists that fulfilling sex can only stem from a deep love from your partner. But my answer is that in some instances, the old ways are in fact better, much better. In fact, when it comes to the subject of love, I have yet to find anything that speaks with the eloquence of truthfulness other than good old life. Okay? 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 8. If you haven't looked that up or read that, it is a very common passage that's read at many weddings. It's known as the love chapter. 1 Corinthians 13. Look that up. It's very, very good. So we've got to teach our children the proper way of sex, but then also when we enter that with our spouses, we need to realize that our main goal should be to please the other one. And if we're both entering into it with that mentality, then things are going to go really well, versus if one of us are entering into it with a selfish mentality of what can I get out of it. Let's see. So he goes into the two main points that he has basically hammered throughout this book, and it is men and women are different. And point 2, sex really does begin in the kitchen. Okay, so this part, he really goes into the nitty-gritty of sex and understanding sex. Our views and how we look at it. God created us very differently. Men are visual. Women tend not to be as visual. Not that that's a one broad brush paints all. Obviously, there are exceptions, but we need to understand our differences as men and women. I'm going to read just a couple differences that he says are big. Men think that sexual intercourse is the most special physical act, while women will say that the most special act is just being held and holding on to the man she loves. Does that mean that women don't enjoy sex? Not at all. Of course they do. But it's the point of a woman feels most loved and is going to be most satisfied when she feels cherished. Another way that men and women are different is that men are much more readily aroused by sight than women. I kind of already alluded to that. Yeah, this is funny. He said that in men's magazines, what's all through men's magazines, right? Bikinis, Playboy bunnies, right? All those things are scantily dressed women. But if you would suggest what kind of magazines women would look at, not many of them are going to do well by half-naked men. That's just not the way God wired our brains. He said that his wife always claimed that he looked sexier with a suit on than naked. um, what else? Differences. Um, so we obviously need to be understanding of where the other one is coming from. So, ladies, if you read this book and you're like, see, this is exactly how I am, my husband doesn't get it, right? Well, be understanding that he doesn't get it and also be sympathetic towards he doesn't operate like you do. So give him some grace and vice versa. Being understanding towards each other's differences is always the better choice. Another area that's different is that women tend to be more verbal than visual stimulation. Women are just better at talking. That is true. So go back to the Playboy magazine. He said that a woman's Playboy magazine is romance novels. The male hero of these books always burns with passion, right? For the woman, he would go anywhere, do anything, suffer any injustice in his effort to win her hand, right? No wonder so many millions of female readers are sighing dreamlessly and wishing the men in their lives were more like these fantasy characters in the books they read. So I'm going to bring in my own little spiel for this, but he's showing the differences between that novel, romance novel, is going to do absolutely nothing for a man versus that's what a woman wants versus the Playboy that's going to give the man what he needs. Refuse. Oh, my charger. I refuse, and I don't know if I talked about this in one of my Monday motivations. I probably did, but I'm going to say it again here. I refuse to read romance novels or watch romance movies unless it's with my husband. And my husband won't watch romance movies with me. If there was one that like really, really wanted to watch and would ask him to, he totally would. But basically, what happens in our female brain is exactly what he said. We see these men that are actors, are not real characters, and then we start to this side of discontentment of, well, why doesn't my husband do that? Or I wish my husband would do that, or I wish he would do less of that. Did you see how he treated me last night or whatever? These romance novels, these love stories in these movies are not real life. So I do not, something that I do to protect my marriage is I do not watch them. I never want anything to be put into my mind that would make me spark something in my mind that would make me discontent with my marriage or my husband, anything like that. So that is just a boundary that I won't cross. I go to a scrapbooking retreat twice a year with some ladies, and I remember when I first started going, I just had one child, maybe. I remember taking our first little girl, but anyway, we watched a lot of movies, and not that we're watching, but like we're scrapbooking and kind of watching, listening, that kind of thing. And I'm not necessarily a movie person anyway, but you're with a bunch of women. They're not going to watch, Mission Impossible movies and James Bond and things like that. They're going to watch romance movies. So there was a couple times, and again, I just made that shortly, maybe even when we were engaged. I knew my temptation in my heart to start, and I remember as a young, girl too, like if I was obsessed with Twilight. I read all the Twilight books, and I just loved that series. And it was a running joke at the time when my fiance at the time would like say, "Oh my gosh, that is so stupid." It's about wolves and vampires. I'm like, "No, it's not. It's such a love story." And they're like, "What?" So anyway, I just remember being like, that's what I want, and all these things, and I yearn for that and long for that, which is such a good thing. But when we're fueling that, especially when we're married, I mean, daydreaming about it before you're married is one thing, but then after you're married, you have what you got. And comparing it to other men, other relationships, is just not something that you want to mess with. So that's my spiel. To protect your marriage, don't read romance novels and watch all those movies. Oh, back to what I was saying about the scrapbooking retreat. There was a couple of like sex scenes that came on, and I was like, oh, Lord, had mercy. And I suddenly, like, I was uncomfortable because of what was going on. And I remember maybe I was talking to one of the other ladies about this or whatever. And basically, maybe I listened to a podcast, I don't remember. But basically, this guy that I was listening to posed the question, would you watch what you just did on the television screen through a window at somebody's house? Well, heck no, that'd be weird, right? Watching that, like, that is private. You would never watch a sex scene like that through somebody's window into their room. But why do we say it's okay when it's a television screen? We think that's perfectly fine. I thought with a room of 10 women, you thought it was fine. It is not fine. We shouldn't be watching that stuff. And that's just something that on a movie, heaven, can we only imagine what all this pornography and things like that that's doing to our husbands' brains, that's doing, comparing. On the flip side of that, these men that are comparing their wives to these porn stars and expect them to behave in ways that these porn stars are doing, just protect your marriage and be sensitive. Don't become desensitized to this stuff just because it's a TV screen. If you wouldn't watch it through somebody's window to their house, don't be watching it on a TV screen either. So anyway, that's my little spiel on that. Okay, so again, back to the idea of sex begins in the kitchen. He said that sex is an all-day affair. That it starts in the morning when we say goodbye to each other, when he comes home, all of those things. What else did he say here? Yeah, so he's talking about neither sex, male or female, is a spectator sport where one party gets to sit back and wait for the action to begin. Okay, both have to be mutually fulfilling and exciting for each other. Yeah. Okay. Here he goes into depth about actual what happens with the genitalia, and all of that during the act of sex. So I'm not going to just get into it. So page 273, he talks about, I think he was in a counseling session, if I remember correctly, that he said a lot of men are lousy lovers. Why? Because most of them fail to understand that sex begins in the kitchen, but they really don't know much about the act of sex itself. Most of them assume that the insertion of the penis into the vagina must be the highlight of the woman's sex life, just as it is for them. But this isn't true, guys. So women, if you can't have this conversation with your husband, please play this video for him and come to this part so that I can educate him. Actually, the most exciting part of sex for the woman occurs in the outer plumbing. Okay? So let me have just a couple. So he said he remembers this couple, and he asked the man if he exercised great caution and much gentleness when he stroked his wife's clitoris. And his response was, hit her water it? Men, if you don't know what a clitoris is, you are a lousy lover, and you need to educate yourself, okay? In your defense, you are a man, and unless the woman in your life, Lord willing, your wife, if you had a really, really, really good mother, maybe she told you before or a daddy told you before you got married. Hopefully that's the case. Oh, Lord have mercy. I have 4 boys. Help me, Father. Okay. If you don't know what that is, you need to ask your wife, and wives, you need to tell your husband, because they don't have one. They don't know what feels good, what doesn't feel good. So you guys need to communicate, and you need to have those conversations, okay? So again, just like we started the book with, you have to have those uncomfortable conversations with your children to teach them the proper things about sex. You have to have those uncomfortable conversations with your spouse so that you know what you guys are talking about. So in you guys' defense, you don't have one of those. I'm not going to say it again, but how are you supposed to know if your woman doesn't tell you? Okay, so women, again, be sensitive to your men, give them some grace, and help them in this area so that they can help. Okay? All right. Communication must occur. That was my note. Oh, I thought this was really cool. I did not know this. Okay? So, okay. So, in that, it's putting this out there, but it's totally fine. I hope it helps somebody. Okay? Men need to know that the actual vagina, okay, has very few nerve endings in it. It's not that sensitive, okay? However, the clitoris does, okay? He says one of the neatest things that he thinks about that is that apparently the only reason that God created that was to respond. Okay, there's nothing else that really does. Versus, I know for me, I'm going to be very thankful in a couple weeks when I have a vagina, that this baby can come out. And thank God that there's not a ton of nerve endings, although at the time it sure feels like there is. But that's not where that stimulation comes from, and that's not where the orgasm comes from. So talk to your spouse about this, please. I had a friend who was on the verge of getting divorced, and sex was an issue, and she said, I don't know how long that they had been married, maybe a handful of years, and she had not experienced an orgasm. We had to talk through these things, okay? On her side, she has to talk that through. She has to be able to talk to her husband about that and express those things to him in a loving way, not a condescending way, not a you suck at this way, nothing like that. And on the opposite side, you need to be able to receive what she is saying, and vice versa. If there's issues on the guy's side that he's not being pleasured, then they need to be able to talk about this, okay? This is important. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's important, and that couple ended up getting divorced. So take time to talk about these things. If you two can't talk about it, or you've tried to, get a therapist, okay? Message me. We will do couples, it's not therapy, counseling, couples coaching, and we will work through some of these things, okay? Because it's probably going to be, when there's a third party who honors both of you, it's going to be easier to discuss these things because you're probably going to present them in a less harsh manner when somebody else is there, and you're probably going to be able to receive them a little less offensively when somebody else is there too. So if you need a third party to be able to discuss these things, do it. Call a therapist. You're welcome to call me. I can recommend somebody to you if you don't feel comfortable with me, and discuss these things, because this is something worth fighting for in your marriage, okay? He said somewhere else too that this couple that had been married like 30 years, they both weren't orgasming. He's like, what a, and then they discussed it or whatever, and then they started having the best sex ever. And he was like, what a waste of 30 years, because they're not communicating and they're not working through these things. So don't wait, okay? God designed marriage to be such a beautiful thing. It takes work. It takes daily effort to pour into each other, but it's so worth it. So don't avoid the hard, okay? So, and I tell my children this all the time. Usually the hard things in life that we don't want to do are the ones that come with the best reward. Okay, if you don't go bust your butt in the garden and pull all those weeds from the strawberries, we're not going to get any strawberries. Versus if you go bust your butt out there, get them cleaned up, all the things that we need to do, then we get to enjoy strawberries. And that's just one, example. You don't go to work, you don't get paid. So just because something's hard, don't avoid it. And most of the time, if something is hard, it's worth fighting for. So you're probably going in the right direction if it's hard. Anyway, okay, we need to move on to the next chapter. Okay, couples of promise. So basically, this chapter was so good to end with, and that basically, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of, it's called Promise Keepers, I think, was the Billy Graham, PK, Promise Keepers. Bill Graham used to run, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure that you guys have heard of this. I know my husband, that's part of his testimony is his dad took him to one when he was like maybe 13 or 14, and it's just thousands and thousands of men worshiping, coming back home with a renewed spirit to be a good, godly husband and father and things. And basically from this, Kevin Lehman was like, yes, this is so great, but we need this for marriages. So he started coming up with this thing, Couples of Promise, and I think he hosted conferences. I don't know if he still does or not, but that's basically the premise of this chapter and his idea of this Couples of Promise. And he goes through the 10 commitments of marriage. So I'll read those to you. And then he goes in to describe them briefly. He said not only do they offer, and like I said, I don't know if he does this anymore. What year was this written? 2006. It was reprinted last, so it's 20 years old. So yeah, I don't know if he's still doing these conferences, but he did say that he also teaches classes so that on marriage in their home churches. So I think that he has like a curriculum that you could probably get if that's something that you wanted to do in your church or your small group with husbands and wives. I may even look into that. So anyway, Couples of Promise. 10 commitments here. So instead of the 10 commandments, 10 commitments. Okay. Number 1, we commit ourselves to make love a daily choice, even when life looks easier somewhere else. Number 2, we commit ourselves to treasure each other as gifts from God. Number 3, we commit ourselves to be quick to forgive and not to hold grudges. 4, we commit ourselves to make time for each other. 5, we commit ourselves to talk daily about our thoughts and feelings. Number 6, we commit ourselves to show respect for each other publicly, privately, avoiding put downs, selfish demands, and belittling words. Number 7, we commit ourselves to try to get behind each other's eyes to understand each other's specific needs. Number 8, we commit ourselves to do all we can to make sure our marriage has a positive impact on those around us. 9, we commit ourselves to pray for each other and to support each other's spiritual growth. And 10, we commit ourselves to honor God and each other through our thoughts, words, and actions. So these are so good. This section here is probably about 20 pages long. So we've got 20 minutes, and I'm going to try to do my best to fly through these. So commitment 1, commit ourselves to make love a daily choice, even when love looks easier somewhere else. Marriage isn't everything it's cracked up to be. It's better. Okay. And as anything, it gets better the more effort and time you put into it. Okay. Most of us will look back, and I've talked about this, I'm pretty sure, in one of the past book clubs, but we look back at our wedding pictures and think, how in love we were and how we pursued each other and all of those things. But the pursuit needs to continue throughout that marriage in order for it to grow. Um, and the hard parts make it so much sweeter. I look back at our wedding photo, and of course, there's things that I cherish and are special about that time that are different than they are now. But I would never go back to that. My husband and I are so much more committed to each other. Our love is so much deeper. We understand each other better. We've been through so many things together, good and hard. And I wouldn't want to go back to that. And people will say, well, he's not who I married or she's not who I married. I would hope not. I would hope that I am not the same person that my husband married 13 years. Because if I did, there's a big problem. I could not be the same as I was then. I should be more mature, more godly, all those things. The sanctification process better had worked for the last 13 years than me be the same as I was on our marriage day. So no, don't, that whole thought of, oh, that's not who I married. Okay. I get that. And maybe there's some things that you've lost sight of, like you should be pursuing each other, those types of things. But the cultural lie is that, well, if they're not what they used to be when you married them, then get out. And that's just not godly. Every day you have to decide to love your mate. Every single day you have to commit to them. That's the grass. People say, "Oh, the grass is greener," right? Just remember that if you manage to climb over to that greener grass, you're still gonna have to mow it. You're still gonna have to mow it. This is why the divorce rate and consecutive marriages gets higher and higher. Okay, it's not better. Do the work that you need to. He said, you, on the other hand, have the privilege of experiencing the miracle of two becoming one. That's what God says. It's a sweaty, gritty, gusty kind of miracle, but it can be truly amazing. Okay, you can make it truly amazing by working at it every day. Counter your daily temptation with a daily decision to show love and respect to your spouse. Instead of being pulled away from your marriage with those Playboy magazines and what are they called? Love novels and love movies. Don't do that. Don't go there. Okay? Instead of that stuff being pulling you away, take a step towards the greater commitment of your marriage. Don't even dance with temptation, which is what I said. Thank you, Jesus. Flip the channel, turn the page, avert your eyes. Remind yourself of the blessing that God has given you in your marriage and commit yourself to do the work necessary to really make it fly. And you can. I promise you can. Number 2, we commit ourselves to cherish each other as gifts from God. Okay? Check your lens. Check your lens and how you are viewing your spouse. There is no perfect spouse out there. You are going to have to work through issues with every single person, okay? A couple of scriptures here for you. Thank you. Remember I said earlier in this book study that the only thing that I would change about this book is that it lacked scriptural depth, which is the oomph and the reason behind the why. I appreciate all the statistics and facts and application things, but scripture is really what is the sword that's going to fight for our marriage and give us the foundation. So Romans 12:10, be devoted to one another in brotherly love. The Apostle Paul says, honor one another above yourselves. Okay? And if your spouse is a God-given treasure, it makes sense that you would be just as devoted. Philippians 2:3, in humility, consider others better than yourself. When you begin to honor your spouse as a treasure from God, everything changes. These two concepts, devotion and honor, balance each other. Devotion is a passionate thing, but honor is a practical matter that will sustain your marriage. Number 3, commit yourselves to be quick to forgive and not hold grudges. Okay. Oh, this is where he mentions the couple that basically was harboring unforgiveness towards each other for like 30 years. And then once they let it go and they forgave each other, he's like, what a waste, 30 years. Okay, here's a good distinction that I need to mention. Okay, forgiveness does not mean that you excuse your spouse's behavior. Okay, man or woman. Okay, forgiveness is not excusing. It doesn't say, "Oh, that's okay, no problem. You can call me names. You can do this. You can." No, no, no. That's not forgiveness. Okay. On the contrary, it says that there was a problem, a big problem that I have to forgive you for. So it's not dismissing what the other spouse did that needs forgiven. It's calling it out and that I need to forgive you for it. Obviously, I'm not talking about the exception of abuse and things like that, but I'm talking about the daily, your husband comes in grumpy and you made supper and put on your high heels and are ready and he's like, "Oh, I'm so tired," and doesn't greet you the way that you should, that you want him to. We got to forgive and we got to see things through the other person's eyes. Like I said, change your lens. Yeah. Let's see what else. Oh, he's talking about the example of Jesus. Okay. The adulterer who was caught in the act, right? And he was going to be stoned to death. And Jesus said, "Well, whoever is without sin cast the first stone." Nobody cast the first stone. Now, did Jesus say, "Oh, that's okay. Just go and keep having affairs. You're fine. I forgive you. I'll forgive you 77 times 77, right?" No. What did Jesus tell the adulterer or adulteress? Go and sin no more. Okay, so you can forgive your spouse for things that they have done, but it's separated from the. Sometimes I think that if I forgive, well, then that will give him permission to do it again. No, okay, go and sin no more. Okay, so this adulteress that Jesus is talking to, she had experienced life-saving forgiveness. But now she had the obligation to change her life. In a marriage, too, forgiveness should instigate change. Okay? Forgiveness does not excuse bad behavior. In fact, it shines a spotlight on it. Okay? But you have to forgive in your heart. Okay? This is a good one. I like this one. Don't tell you to forgive and forget. I tell you forgive and remember. Why? Why? We don't forgive and remember to hold a grudge, because that would go against 1 Corinthians 13 and the love chapter that we talked about, where it says love keeps no record of wrong. We don't forgive and hold on to. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. But to completely forget is just stupid. Why is it stupid? Because we have to learn from what we did wrong. If we're not learning, "Oh, I'm getting up on a soapbox, use me, Jesus." If we're not learning from what we did wrong, then what's the point? And we're going to repeat the same bad behavior. Okay? So we need to forgive and remember not to hold a grudge, not to bring it back up as a weapon. No. But to not do the same thing again, right? History repeats itself because we forget and we do the same dumb, do the same dumb thing. Okay? We need to remember so that we don't repeat the same mistakes. And again, do not use that as an excuse to keep a record of wrong of what your husband or wife has done. Let it go. Okay? If you cling to those things, I promise you will suffocate your marriage. Don't do that. Let it go to experience real freedom, but do not forget so that you don't do the same things over again. Right, move that. Number 4. We commit ourselves to make time for each other. Okay, don't let your spouse get lost in the shuffle. You need to spend time together. You need to make a commitment. It doesn't have to be a big thing. So we started this. Oh goodness, what child were we on? 5, 6. And those moments that just naturally came didn't come naturally anymore. And we risked that and we made a commitment. So for us, we take our children to my mother-in-laws and father-in-laws every Wednesday. if you don't have somebody like that, aunt, uncle, something that can watch your children, pay a babysitter. It's worth it. I know it's, as a mom, I'm speaking from logistically. I know that that would be difficult to make sure that they're coming every week or whatever, but your marriage is worth it. Do what you need to do. And I will say sometimes I don't, every date night is not, oh, me getting on my makeup and getting all fancy. Of course, there are some date nights like that, absolutely. But sometimes it's sitting on your bed with takeout Chinese, okay? Or sometimes we literally just go on a drive. Or there's been times in the summer where one of us will take the children over and we'll literally sit in the garden. Or sometimes it's a work date. Maybe we have something that we want to get accomplished and we do it together. So don't have this idea of, oh my gosh, date night, I've got to get ready every, Wednesday night to go out and put my little black dress on. No, the point is to spend time with each other. And I'll tell you too, sometimes if we're like having a spat and we can't seem to get over it and it's date night, I do not want to go on date night. But we do, whether we feel like it or not. Those are few and far between, but real life here, people, is that sometimes I don't feel like it. If I'm upset or things just aren't jiving, I'm sure he's felt the same way. But the point is to commit to each other, make it happen, and make time for each other. This is really good. This not only applies to marriage, but our lives in general. And he says the way that you spend your time is an indication of what is most important to you. I felt like I heard it. Oh, I think it's my dog outside. I thought it was a child yelling, but I think it's my dog whining. Okay, so 2 things, okay? Show me your calendar, your schedule, and also your priorities. Show me your checkbook. I'll show you your priorities. Okay? So don't tell me that your spouse or God is your number one priority if the church is taking a backseat to those sports. If your marriage is taking a backseat to those sports. If you'll pay to go to Disney World with your children, but you won't pay to go on a trip for you and your spouse. Your children are more important than your spouse then. Okay? I know those things are tough, but I'm not here to sugarcoat things for you. Go get that from the world. I'm here to tell you the truth, and I'm going to challenge you, and I'm going to encourage you in ways that is going to deepen your marriage, deepen your work with the Lord. I look blurry. I'm so sorry. I honestly don't go back and look at the recording, so hopefully it's not blurry for you. But you look at those things, and I promise you will get a honest review of what are your priorities. Look at your checkbook and look at your calendar. He said there was a theory that we needed to spend quality time instead of quantity time. He says it's both. Completely agree. Here's a question that Miss Nancy Campbell from our book that we're starting next week. We went to some of her retreats before, and one thing that she says that in any decision, you need to ask yourself, is this decision going to draw us closer together as a family, or is it going to pull us apart? And you should always ask that. So he goes through and says, is this job worth my marriage? And that nothing should take precedent over your marriage, including the children. So it's just really good. Okay, I have combative rules. Here's another one. He said another tip. I fully believe in this, and I get so much pushback over this, and I don't even care. Don't let your children get involved in everything under the sun. I talk about this in my newsletter too. If you're not signed up for the newsletter, it's free. Sign up. I know you want to develop their talents, but too much activity puts pressure on the entire family's timetable. I get it. Okay. I grew up. I'm not even going to get on this. I'm going to have to put this on a YouTube, maybe Monday Motivation. I'm going to make a note of it. How sports are affecting or outside curricular activities are affecting our marriages and families. Okay. I am not against it. I'm not against sports. Okay. But I know what your schedule looks like because I lived it. Okay. And I'm not against sports. I'm not against activities. But when those become, okay, you're telling me that you can't, all right, I'm just going to say it. You're telling me you can't go on one date night with your spouse a week because it's too much and you don't know how to fit it in, but you're going to take your kids to practice every single night. Basketball season is just wrapping up. Every night you had to take your child to that sporting event. And then they had 2 or 3 games, and I know you're not missing a game. So you're telling me that your child's high school sport, 2 to 3 games a week that you're attending, takes a precedent over your marriage? Okay? We got to do the hard thing. Okay? Skip a game. Skip a game. All right? I'm not saying that those things are bad, but I'm saying don't dare sit here and say that your marriage is more important when your schedule looks different. Love you. All knowledge, all out of love and not judgment, because I was there too, and we have to make the same decisions, okay? Number 5, we can move ourselves to talk daily about our thoughts and feelings. Just a quick thing. Neil Clark Warren has 8 secrets to conflict resolutions. Go look those up. They're very good. He says, give time and space for slow sharers. Relax. Talk about life around you. Learn about your mate's passions. Ask penetrating questions. No pun intended. Ask penetrating questions. But don't interrogate. In a way, learn, tell me more about that. And we talked about that in several weeks ago. It can come off as like you have to defend yourself. And why do you think like that? Just don't ask why. Just rephrase that as to tell me more about that. And then listen as much as you speak, or listen twice as much as you speak. Because God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. I tell my children that all the time. And what verse is it? I don't even know, but be slow to, quick to listen and slow to speak. That's a proverb thing, I think, as well. Number 6, commit ourselves to show respect to each other publicly and privately, avoiding put down selfish demands and belittling words. Just don't do it. Don't talk bad about your spouse, especially in front of people. That is an absolute no, 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 never, ever do it. Okay? And so I talked about this in my Monday motivation video where I talk about speaking life over our children. It multiplies when we speak positively over our children when people are there. So never ever speak negatively in public about your spouse. And I would encourage you to speak positively about them because it will be magnified because of that many, whoever's around, times that many people. 7, commit ourselves to try and get behind each other's eyes, to understand each other's specific needs. He gives this funny little story about how he was on a business trip, got her this fancy lingerie and LinkedIn from Victoria's Secret. Thought it was like the best thing. Gave it to her, spent way too much money on it, gave it to her, and he said he never saw it again. So he was like, I was thinking I was doing something like super special that I had never done before, and she obviously didn't care, and it wasn't what she wanted. So change your lens to see things the way that your spouse does. Number 8, we commit ourselves to do all we can to make sure that our marriage has a positive impact on those around us. He says we are not alone. We're being watched. Many eyes are following the day-to-day events of our marriages. Okay, that is a little creepy, but if you have children, they're watching. Okay, they're watching. And interestingly enough, in the beginning of this book, the foreword, which I'm not even sure who wrote the foreword, come back next week and you'll find out. said that one of the biggest reasons that marriage itself, the entity of it, is not being valued is because the prospects, the people that are potentially going to get married, aren't seeing any good marriages. There's such a lack of commitment and happy marriages that it's completely losing its value. Okay, so this is what that's talking about. He says we have a generation of young adults now who are terrified of commitment because half of them saw their parents get divorced. Why have they learned from their parents? When the Bible says that God punishes children for the sin of their fathers to the third and fourth generation, this is one of the things that that God is probably talking about. We have to make our marriages not perfect, okay? Don't misunderstand me, not perfect, but ones that are committed and loving. And our children should look at our marriages and say, I want that. I want that forgiveness. I want when dad or mom completely loses it on the other one, and 2 days later, they're bawling and asking forgiveness, and the other one's embracing and loving and forgiving and extending grace and extending forgiveness. That's what our children need to see, that they are there when you're sick, when you're doing really, really well and succeeding, that you're the biggest cheerleader of yourself. They need to see that commitment, that love, raw, real love, not perfect, but committed daily to, and pouring into each other, okay? And when young people can see that, then they're like, heck yeah, I want to get married. That's what I want. And we need to be examples. Dang it, we need to be examples of that. Man, I need to do better. So it says that they will be motivated. These young people will be motivated and adopt these positive patterns. And I'm getting emotional because, man, I don't know if any of you know what it's like. I pray that you do. And maybe after we go through this book, you'll open your heart to it. But the accountability that children provide is so humbling, to really challenge you in every area of your life, whether it's personally, whether it's in your marriage. I know that I could do so much better in uplifting my husband through his struggles and not tearing him down whenever I'm struggling. And the children see that. And I've seen them be devastated and terrified when we have an argument and things are not good, and they're like, don't fight. But then I've also seen on the other hand where they're like, oh, stop kissing. And or one of my little boys, if they ask a silly question like, oh, who's your favorite guy or something, or I'll be upset, and back to the first example, and they'll be like, well, of course dad's your favorite guy, or I'll be upset and they'll bring me the phone and be like, here, call dad. Because they just know that that's who I go to, that's my person. So we need to make that a priority for our children. You have the positive patterns of marriage and parenting get passed on and on and on. But here's the hope, okay? So generations are cursed 3 to 4. The sins of the father follow 3 to 4 generations. Oh, he says, I love you. Guess what he says? That faithfulness is passed down to thousands of generations. You have the ability to pass down a legacy of commitment to your spouse for thousands of generations. And you can break that curse of divorce, of bad marriages. You can break that in the name of Jesus. Turn it around and bless thousands of generations after you. Okay, here's a couple things. Okay, let your children know that you guys are crazy about each other. Never use your children as pawns in your disputes. Speak often about the joys of marriage. Don't air your dirty laundry. Offer counsel to younger couples who wants it. And again, we're not offering perfection because nothing is perfect apart from Jesus. We're offering real life commitment, and that's going to be a lot more impactful to see how you can stay committed through the imperfectness of two people trying to make it work versus just this romantic love story, right, that we're fed in all these crap movies. Commitment number 9, we commit ourselves to pray for each other and support each other's spiritual growth. He talks about a story about this pastor who was doing all of this stuff, but he neglected his wife and children. And I wrote in here, I bet that's why God put the prerequisite, as I can't even tell you what scripture it is, but there's prerequisite to what a pastor's life should be like. And one says that if you can't lead your family, then you have no business leading a church. And I thought it would be so easy, and I'm not judging, I'm saying it would be so easy to get caught up in church life and wanting to serve and honor God and all those things, to put your family aside, even accidentally. And I bet that's why God put that in there, because he knew that that's something that we would struggle with. So your family needs to come before your congregation. Pray together, keep it simple, and encourage friends. Hebrews 10:24 says, let us consider how we can spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Give thanks and realize that each spouse is on their own spiritual journey. The way God is moving in your life may not be the way God is moving in your spouse's life, and that's okay. You're not, I've said this before, and I'll say it again and again, you're not your spouse's Holy Spirit. Let God do that, and you encourage. Number 10, final one, we commit ourselves to honor God and each other through our thoughts, words, and actions. Okay. The greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The second greatest commandment is like it, to love others, love your neighbor as yourself. Okay. You should love your spouse as you love yourself. And people are like, well, I don't even love myself. I have self-esteem. Okay, but you're not. Again, those are the exceptions in talking about the rule. You would not treat yourself the way that you treat your husband. You would give yourself grace and forgiveness a lot more than you would your spouse. Let's reverse that. Okay. We need to honor each other. Okay. Battle to blessing. And he talked about battling for your marriage. And I kind of talked about that a little bit. So many scriptures here on the last couple pages. I'm just going to list them off to you. Please look them up because they are foundational for marriage. 1 Peter 3:7. Ephesians 5:21 talks about submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. There's a couple good ones there. Ephesians 5:21, 22 through 25 is a great one. Proverbs 31 talks about the woman and how her husband and children rise up and call her blessed. She praises him at the city gate. By the way, we talked about that. In Genesis, from the very beginning, okay, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. Okay. Marriage is so powerful, and it's worth. I know I'm going over here, so I'm going to wrap it up. I know it's hard, but it's a good hard. Hard is not bad. Commitment is not bad. And apart from your relationship from Christ, it should be your number one priority in life. Above your children, above your job, all of it. Because when you have a solid marriage, all those other things are going to come into place. If you have a really, really good job, but your marriage is on the rock, your job's not going to be fulfilling for you. If you are an empty nester and have ignored your marriage and your children are gone, you're going to look at each other and be like, who the heck are you? Right? Your marriage is important. And I hope that, especially this last session when we talked about all these commitments, And I pray the Lord spoke through me there at the end, well, through the whole thing, but definitely towards the end, as to the power that your marriage has to affect thousands of generations after you. So I'll leave it at that on a high note. Thanks for joining. I hope that you enjoyed this. Share these videos with somebody that you think might be encouraged by this. And I pray that your marriages will be strengthened through this. So God bless you, and I will see you next week for our first week of Be Fruitful and Multiply. All right, take care.